The bullet would travel for exactly 1.3 seconds before it reached the man who was about to kill 12 Americans. Technical Sergeant Elias Vance did not know this yet. He did not know that in the next 40 minutes, everything he had buried for 3 years would claw its way back to the surface. Right now, in the pale gray light of an Afghan dawn, he was just the Overwatch, the guy on the rooftop with the radio. The afterthought. 800 meters below and to the west, the 12-man element from 3rd Special Forces Group moved through the narrow streets of a village that had no name on any American map. Vance watched them through the Schmidt and Bender scope mounted on his M110, tracking their movement with the calm patience of a man who had done this more times than he could count. The rifle was not supposed to be his primary tool. Combat controllers called in airstrikes, coordinated helicopters, painted targets with lasers. The rifle was self-defense. That was what his files said. That was what everyone believed. Before we continue, drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. Maybe you know someone who served in a role that never got the recognition it deserved. The voice of Master Sergeant Colt Hennigan crackled through the radio, thick with the confidence of a man who had never doubted himself a day in his life. Overwatch, this is Dagger 1. We are approaching the compound now. Try to stay awake up there. Vance keyed his radio. Overwatch copies. I have eyes on your 6. 2 local nationals on the rooftop, 3 buildings north of your position. They are watching you. Hennigan's response came back dismissive. Noted. Probably just curious farmers. Keep the channel clear unless you have something important. Vance released the transmit button and said nothing. He had learned years ago that arguing with men like Hennigan was like arguing with weather. You simply endured it and kept doing your job. He shifted his position slightly, feeling the grit of the collapsed concrete beneath his chest, and continued to scan. The building he occupied had been a home once. Now it was 3 walls and half a roof, perfect for concealment, offering a clear line of sight to the target compound and the extraction route beyond. Staff Sergeant Dura O'Yelleran's voice came through next, quieter, almost apologetic. Overwatch, Dagger 7. Thanks for the heads up on those observers. We will keep our eyes open. Vance allowed himself the smallest smile. O'Yelleran was the only one on the team who treated him like a professional rather than a piece of equipment. Copy, Dagger 7. I have got you covered. The sun was beginning to crest the mountains to the east, painting the valley in shades of gold and amber that would have been beautiful if Vance had not seen what those mountains concealed. 3 years in these valleys. 3 years of watching men move through terrain that wanted them dead. 3 years since he had stopped being what he used to be and started being something smaller. Something safer. His scope settled on the compound walls. The team was in position now, stacking on the main entrance. The extraction was supposed to be simple. A high-value informant had requested emergency exfil after his cover was blown. Get in, get the asset, get out. 30 minutes on the ground. No expected resistance. Vance had heard those words before. No expected resistance. He had learned to distrust them the way other men distrusted politicians and used car salesmen. He scanned the surrounding buildings again, methodical, patient. The 2 observers on the northern rooftop had disappeared. That was not unusual. People came and went. But something in his chest tightened, an old instinct that had kept him alive through situations that had killed better men. Movement. Eastern Ridge. 600 meters. He swung the scope, adjusting for the distance. For a moment, there was nothing. Then he saw it. A glint of glass. Sunlight reflecting off something that should not be there. A scope. A lens. Someone else was watching. His finger moved to the radio, then stopped. Hennigan would dismiss it, would tell him he was jumping at shadows, would waste precious seconds arguing while the team moved deeper into the kill zone. Vance looked again. The glint was gone now, but he marked the position in his mind. Grid coordinates burned into his memory with the precision of a man who had once made his living by knowing exactly where death was hiding. The compound gate swung open. Dagger 1, this is Overwatch. Vance kept his voice flat, professional. I have possible observer on the eastern ridge. Recommend you hold position for visual confirmation. Negative, Overwatch. Hennigan's voice was sharp with irritation. We are already committed. Asset is priority. Maintain observation and stop wasting bandwidth. The team flowed through the gate and disappeared behind the compound walls. Vance counted them. 12 men. 12 lives. He had watched teams like this before. Had been part of teams like this before in another life, wearing a different uniform. He shifted his scope back to the eastern ridge. The glint appeared again, and this time it was not alone. 1, 2, 3, 4. He counted the positions, each one a muzzle flash waiting to happen, each one a carefully placed piece in a trap that was about to spring shut. They were not observers. They were fighters, and they had been waiting. Dagger 1, Vance said, his voice carrying an edge that surprised even him. You need to abort. Repeat, abort extraction. You are walking into an ambush. Static filled his earpiece. Then Hennigan's voice, annoyed and condescending. Overwatch, I do not have time for your paranoia. We have the asset. Moving to extraction point now. Vance watched through his scope as the compound gate opened again and the team emerged. A frightened-looking Afghan man in civilian clothes surrounded by American operators. They moved toward the open ground that led to the extraction point. 400 meters of exposed terrain. 400 meters of kill zone. And on the eastern ridge, Vance saw the first muzzle rise. The first shot split the morning air like a crack of thunder, and Technical Sergeant Elias Vance watched a man he had shared coffee with 6 hours ago stumble and fall. Sergeant First Class Tomas Ibarra, the team's designated marksman, dropped to one knee and then collapsed onto his side, his rifle clattering against the hard-packed earth. The round had taken him through the shoulder, spinning him like a puppet with cut strings. Vance was already keying his radio. Dagger 1, you have contact. Eastern Ridge, multiple shooters. Ibarra is down. Get to cover now. The response was chaos. Voices overlapping, shouting, the staccato crack of return fire. Through his scope, Vance watched the team scatter, dragging their wounded and the terrified asset toward the minimal cover of a crumbling stone wall. It was not enough. The wall was too low, too short, too exposed. They were pinned in the open with nowhere to go. Hennigan's voice cut through the noise, breathless, but still carrying that insufferable confidence. Overwatch, call in air support. We need guns on that ridge now. Vance was already switching frequencies, his fingers moving with practice speed. Warhammer Base, this is Talon 2-6. Troops in contact, grid follows. Requesting immediate close air support. The response from base came back with the worst 3 words he could have heard. Talon 2-6, Varamir. All rotary assets grounded due to incoming sandstorm. Fixed wing unavailable for 45 minutes minimum. You're on your own. For a moment, Vance felt the world narrow to a single point of cold clarity. No air, no helicopters, no cavalry coming over the hill. 12 men pinned in a kill zone with enemy fighters holding the high ground. And the only thing standing between them and annihilation was a combat controller on a rooftop with a rifle he was not supposed to know how to use. Dagger 1, Vance transmitted, keeping his voice level. Air support is negative. Sandstorm has grounded all aviation assets. Earliest support is 45 mics. Hennigan's response was a single word, sharp and furious. What? Vance did not repeat himself. He was too busy counting. Through his scope, he could see the ridge positions more clearly now as the enemy fighters grew bold, exposing themselves to take better shots. 8, 9, 11. At least 11 fighters, maybe more, all with elevated positions and clear sight lines to the pinned Americans. Another burst of fire raked the stone wall, and Vance saw one of the operators flinch as fragments sprayed across his face. They were being methodical about it. Not rushing. They knew they had time. Overwatch. O'Yellerin's voice was tight with controlled fear. Can you see their positions? Can you give us something? Vance hesitated for exactly 1 second. It was not doubt. It was something older than that. Something that lived in the space between who he used to be and who he had become. 3 years ago, he would not have hesitated at all. 3 years ago, he would have already been shooting. Dagger 7. I count 11 enemy positions on the eastern ridge. Primary concentration at grid 374, Tunner 6. Secondary positions spread north along the ridgeline. They have overlapping fields of fire on your position. Great, Hennigan snarled. So we are completely trapped. Any other good news, weatherman? Vance ignored the insult. He had been called worse by better men. His focus was on the ridge, on the careful geometry of angles and distances that had once been his entire world. 800 meters. Crosswind from the north, maybe 5 miles per hour. Elevation differential of approximately 120 meters. He knew these calculations the way other men knew their children's birthdays. His hand moved to the M110's bolt, checking the round in the chamber by feel. Match-grade ammunition. 20 rounds in the magazine. He had not fired this rifle in combat for 3 years. Had not wanted to. Had promised himself he never would again. Overwatch, O'Yellerin again. Ibarra is hit bad. We cannot move him without exposing ourselves. We need options. Vance watched through his scope as 2 of the operators tried to drag Ibarra toward better cover, only to be driven back by a concentrated burst of fire. The enemy knew exactly what they were doing. They were not trying to kill everyone at once. They were pinning them in place, wearing them down, waiting for the perfect moment to finish it. This was not random. This was professional. Dagger elements, Vance said slowly. This is a coordinated ambush. They knew your route and your timing. Someone set you up. Hennigan's voice came back hot with anger. Save the analysis for the debrief, Overwatch. If we live that long, just keep watching and let us know if anything changes. Watching. That was all they expected from him. All they wanted from him. The combat controller on the rooftop, good for calling in strikes that were not coming, good for coordinating support that did not exist. Just Overwatch. Vance settled his cheek against the stock of his rifle and let out a slow breath. The scope's reticle drifted across the ridge, pausing on each enemy position, measuring, calculating. Old instincts stirred in the dark places he had tried to wall off. The places where a different man still lived. A man who had once been very good at one very specific thing. He found the enemy fighter who seemed to be directing the others. Taller than the rest, moving with authority, gesturing toward the pinned Americans with calm precision. The leader. 830 meters. Upple shot. Wind steady. Vance's finger rested outside the trigger guard. He could feel his heartbeat in his temples, slow and steady. The same rhythm it had always found in moments like this. The body remembered even when the mind tried to forget. Below, another burst of fire. Someone screamed. Through the radio, Vance heard O'Yellerin calling for a medic, heard the desperation bleeding through the professional calm. They were dying down there. Men he knew, men who had dismissed him, mocked him, called him weatherman and radio boy and the guy who calls him planes. Men who did not know what he was, what he had been. Vance centered the reticle on the enemy leader's chest, and the scope on the eastern ridge swung toward his position. Vance moved before conscious thought caught up with instinct. He rolled left, abandoning his position behind the low wall, just as the first round cracked through the space where his head had been. Concrete dust exploded into the air, fragments stinging his neck and cheek as he pressed himself flat against the collapsed floor of the ruined building. They had a sniper, a real one. He lay still for 3 heartbeats, listening to the echo of the shot fade across the valley. The angle told him everything he needed to know. The enemy marksman was not on the main ridge with the others. He was somewhere higher, somewhere with a clear view of the Overwatch position. A dedicated counter-sniper, positioned specifically to eliminate anyone providing support from elevation. This was not just an ambush. This was a textbook annihilation. Dagger 1, this is Overwatch. Vance kept his voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding his system. Be advised, enemy has counter-sniper capability. I'm taking fire. Relocating now. Hennigan's response was almost lost in the sound of gunfire. Outstanding. So now we have no air, no extraction, and no Overwatch. Anyone else want to give me more good news? Vance did not bother responding. He was too busy surviving. The ruined building offered 3 possible routes to new cover, and he had perhaps seconds before the enemy sniper adjusted position for another shot. He chose the route that kept the most rubble between himself and the high ground, crawling on his elbows and knees through debris that tore at his uniform and skin. Another round punched through the wall behind him, close enough that he felt the pressure wave against his back. The enemy was good, very good, but he was shooting at shadows now, guessing at Vance's movement rather than tracking it directly. Vance reached a collapsed section of interior wall and pressed himself into the narrow gap between concrete and earth. His breathing was controlled, deliberate, the way he had been taught a lifetime ago. Panic was a luxury that got men killed. He had learned that lesson in blood. Through the gap, he could see a sliver of the eastern ridge. The main enemy force was still focused on the pinned Americans below, pouring fire into their inadequate cover. He counted the muzzle flashes. Still 11, maybe 12. The counter-sniper was separate, elevated, working independently. 2 problems. 1 rifle. 20 rounds. O'Yellerin's voice cut through the radio chatter, strained but holding. Overwatch, what is your status? Are you hit? Negative, dagger 7. Vance allowed himself a moment of dark humor. Apparently, they really do not want me watching. Stay down, O'Yellerin said. Do not get yourself killed trying to help us. It was meant as concern, but Vance heard something else beneath the words. The assumption that he could not help. That his role was observation and communication, nothing more. That a combat controller with a rifle was still just a combat controller. The assumption was wrong. Vance shifted his weight, testing the stability of his new position. The angle was bad. He could see the ridge, but not the counter-sniper's likely position. To engage the main enemy force, he would have to expose himself to the marksman hunting him. It was a problem with only one solution, and he did not like it. Base, this is Talon 2-6. He switched frequencies, reaching back to the Tactical Operations Center. Request updated timeline on air support. The response came from a new voice, female, sharp with authority. Talon 2-6, this is Captain Holmquist. I have assumed coordination. Storm front is accelerating. Earliest rotary support, now 60 minutes. Fixed wing is being diverted from another sector, but you're looking at 30 minutes minimum. What is your situation? Vance closed his eyes for a moment. 60 minutes. The team would be dead in 15 at this rate. Warhammer, situation is critical. 12-man element pinned in the open, 1 wounded. Enemy force of approximately 12 with elevated positions and counter-sniper capability. No viable extraction route without fire support. There was a pause. When Captain Holmquist spoke again, her voice carried the weight of someone doing terrible math. Talon 2-6, can you provide suppressive fire from your position? Vance looked at the M110 in his hands. The rifle he carried for self-defense. The rifle that was not supposed to matter. Negative, Warhammer. Counter-sniper has my position marked. Any engagement will expose me to direct fire. Another pause. Then, very quietly, understood. Do what you can. Holmquist out. Do what you can. The words hung in the air like a verdict. Below, he could hear the rhythm of the firefight shifting. The enemy was probing now, testing the American positions, looking for weakness. They had all the time in the world. The sandstorm that grounded American helicopters would not bother men on foot. Vance made a decision. He pulled a small mirror from his kit, a piece of equipment that had saved his life more than once in another war. Angling it carefully, he used the reflection to scan the high ground without exposing his head. It took nearly a minute of patient searching before he found what he was looking for. There, a shadow that did not belong, a shape that was too regular to be natural. The counter-sniper had positioned himself in a cluster of rocks approximately 400 meters above the main ridge, almost directly uphill from Vance's position. It was a masterful spot, offering clear sight lines to any Overwatch position while remaining nearly invisible from below. Nearly invisible, but not quite. Vance studied the position, calculating angles, distances, wind. The shot would be difficult. Uphill, against the light, at a target he could barely see. And the moment he fired, he would give away his new position to every enemy fighter on that ridge. One shot. That was all he would get before everything changed. He thought about the men pinned below, about O'Yellerin's voice on the radio, scared but steady. about Ibarra bleeding in the dirt, about Hennigan, who would never know that the man he had dismissed as useless was the only thing standing between his team and death. Vance settled into position, brought the rifle up, and began to breathe. The crosshairs settled on the shadow in the rocks. 412 meters. Uphill angle of approximately 18 degrees. Wind negligible at this elevation, but stronger near the target. Vance made the adjustments automatically, his hands remembering what his mind had tried to forget. He exhaled slowly, letting his heartbeat settle into the space between seconds. The trigger rested against his finger like an old friend. 3 years since he had taken a shot like this. 3 years since he had wanted to. The shadow moved. Vance fired. The M110 Kika. The crosshairs settled on the shadow in the rocks. 412 meters. Uphill angle of approximately 18 degrees. Wind negligible at this elevation, but stronger near the target. Vance made the adjustments automatically, his hands remembering what his mind had tried to forget. He exhaled slowly, letting his heartbeat settle into the space between seconds. The trigger rested against his finger like an old friend. 3 years since he had taken a shot like this. 3 years since he had wanted to. The shadow moved. Vance fired. The M110 kicked against his shoulder, the sound cracking across the valley like a whip. Through his scope, he saw the shadow jerk and then go still. No movement, no return fire. The counter-sniper was down. For a moment, Vance felt nothing. Then the old satisfaction crept in, cold and precise, and he hated himself for feeling it. No time for that. He was already moving, rolling away from his firing position before the echo of the shot faded. The enemy on the ridge would have marked his muzzle flash. They would be adjusting, redirecting, coming for him now. Dagger 1, this is Overwatch. Vance keyed his radio while crawling toward a new position. Counter-sniper is neutralized. I am engaging the ridge. Hennigan's voice came back sharp with disbelief. Say again, Overwatch. You took out their sniper. Affirmative. Vance found a gap in the rubble that offered a narrow angle on the eastern ridge. I'm going to start thinning their numbers. When I do, you need to move your wounded to better cover. Copy. Silence on the radio. Then O'Yellerin's voice, something new in it. Something like hope. Copy, Overwatch. We are ready to move on your signal. Vance settled into his new position and found his first target. One of the fighters on the ridge had risen slightly, trying to get a better angle on the pinned Americans. He was silhouetted against the brightening sky, confident in his elevation, unaware that the rules had just changed. 806 meters. Vance held low to compensate for the uphill angle, let out half a breath and squeezed. The fighter dropped. Before the body hit the ground, Vance was already shifting to the next target. A man scrambling for cover, suddenly aware that death was reaching up from below. 793 meters. Wind pushing right. Adjustment made. Fire. Another man fell. The ridge erupted in chaos. Fighters who had been calmly executing a perfect ambush were now diving for cover, shouting in Pashto, trying to identify the threat they had not expected. Vance used their confusion, methodically working through the positions he had marked in his memory. Each shot was a calculation. Each trigger pull was a life ended. He did not think about the men he was killing. He could not afford to. That would come later, in the quiet hours when sleep refused to come. Right now, there was only the mission. Only the mathematics of survival. Dagger elements. Move now. Vance transmitted between shots. I have them suppressed. Get Ibarra to hard cover. Through his peripheral vision, he saw the team responding. Operators dragging their wounded toward a more substantial structure at the edge of the kill zone. O'Yellerin was among them, her rifle up and scanning even as she helped carry Ibarra's limp form. They were moving. They were surviving. Vance fired again. Another fighter crumpled. His count was running. 14 rounds remaining. He had dropped 4 enemy fighters in less than 30 seconds, and the remaining hostiles were scrambling to reorient. But they were not running. These were not untrained insurgents. They were regrouping, adapting, seeking new positions that would shield them from his fire. And then a voice crackled across an open frequency, calm and cold, speaking accented English clearly meant to be heard. Impressive shooting, American. The voice carried the quiet confidence of a man who was not afraid. But you have made a mistake. You have shown me what you are. Vance froze. The enemy was using the radio to communicate directly with him. That level of tactical sophistication was rare. Dangerous. I know your position now, the voice continued. And I know what you were trying to do. You cannot save them all. You do not have enough bullets. Vance did not respond. He was already scanning, trying to locate the source of the transmission. The voice had come from somewhere on the ridge, but not from any of the positions he had engaged. There was another leader out there, someone who had been waiting, watching. They call me the Ghost, American. The voice was almost conversational. I have killed 3 of your sniper teams in this valley. You will be the 4th. The words hit Vance like a physical blow. The Ghost. He had heard that name in intelligence briefings, spoken in hushed tones by men who did not scare easily. A Taliban commander who specialized in hunting American marksmen. A ghost who moved through these mountains like smoke, appearing only long enough to kill before vanishing again. Vance keyed his radio, switching to the team frequency. Dagger elements, be advised. Enemy commander identifies as high-value target designation Ghost. Recommend extreme caution. O'Yelleran's voice came back tight. Overwatch, we know that name. He has killed a lot of good people. Then let us make sure he does not add to his count. Vance scanned the ridge again, slower now, more careful. The Ghost would not be in an obvious position. He would be somewhere unexpected, somewhere that offered both concealment and a killing angle. Somewhere that a normal observer would overlook. The sun was higher now, casting long shadows across the rocks. Vance studied those shadows, looking for the one that did not belong. His heart rate was steady, his breathing controlled, but beneath the calm surface, something old was waking up. Something that had slept for 3 years. The Ghost wanted a sniper duel. He wanted to prove that he was the apex predator in these mountains. He did not know who he was hunting. Vance found a flicker of movement in his scope, a shape that was too deliberate to be wind. The Ghost was repositioning, trying to find an angle. The hunt was on. The shape in Vance's scope vanished before he could fire. One moment it was there, a shadow, sliding between rocks, and the next it was gone. The Ghost moved like his name suggested, fluid and formless, never staying in one place long enough to die. Vance held his position, forcing himself to wait. Patience was the sniper's greatest weapon. Impatience was what got men killed. He had learned that lesson in a place very much like this one, in a valley that still haunted his dreams. The memory came without permission. It always did. Fallujah, 3 years ago. A rooftop overlooking a marketplace that had become a killing ground. Vance had been a different man then, wearing a different uniform. Marine Scout Sniper, 2nd Battalion, 8th Marines. His spotter had been a kid from Georgia named PFC Danny Reeves, 22 years old, with a wife back home who was expecting their first child. They had been hunting an insurgent commander for 3 days, following the trail of bodies he left behind, getting closer with every hour. And then, on the morning of the 4th day, they had found him. Or rather, he had found them. Vance remembered the sound of the shot that took Danny in the throat. Remembered the wet gurgle of a young man trying to breathe through a hole that should not have existed. Remembered holding Danny's hand while the light faded from his eyes, while the blood pooled beneath them both, while the enemy's sniper, who had killed him, melted away into the city. He had never found that sniper, had never gotten justice for Danny, had carried that failure like a stone in his chest for 3 years. Through his transition from the Marines to the Air Force, through his retraining as a combat controller, through every mission where he told himself a rifle was just for self-defense. The rifle had always been more than that. It had been a promise, a reminder, a weight he could not put down. Overwatch, status report. O'Yelleran's voice pulled him back to the present. We have Ibarra stabilized, but he needs a medevac soon or we are going to lose him. Vance blinked, forcing the past back into its cage. Copy, Dagger 7. I am working on it. But his hands were not steady. For the first time in years, he could feel the tremor in his fingers, the ghost of a memory that would not die. Danny's face swam before him, young and scared and bleeding out on a rooftop half a world away. You cannot save them all. The ghost's words echoed in his mind. You do not have enough bullets. He had not been able to save Danny, had not been fast enough, good enough, aware enough. The enemy had outmaneuvered him, and a kid from Georgia had paid the price. Vance closed his eyes and breathed. When he opened them again, the tremor was gone. In its place was something colder, something that remembered why he had picked up a rifle in the first place. He had not been able to save Danny Reeves, but he could save these men. He could make sure that no one else died, because he was too broken to do what needed to be done. Dagger 1, this is Overwatch. Vance's voice was steady now, carved from ice. I need you to draw their fire on my mark. Just for 3 seconds. Can you do that? Hennigan's response was incredulous. You want us to expose ourselves so you can take pot shots at the ridge. That is insane. No, Vance said calmly. It is the only way I can locate the enemy commander. He is too disciplined to reveal himself otherwise. I need him to think he has an opportunity. Silence on the radio. Then O'Yelleran spoke up. I will do it. Give me the mark. Negative, Dagger 7. Hennigan's voice was sharp. I am not risking anyone on a hunch from the weatherman. With respect, Master Sergeant, O'Yelleran shot back. The weatherman just killed 5 enemy fighters in under a minute. I think he knows what he is doing. Vance felt something shift in his chest. Gratitude. Trust. Things he had not expected to feel today. 3 seconds, he said. That is all I need. On my mark, one person breaks cover to the east, then immediately returns. The ghost will reposition to take the shot. When he does, I will have him. The radio was silent. Vance could imagine the debate happening below, the looks being exchanged, the calculations being made. He was asking them to trust him with their lives, to believe that a combat controller with a rifle could do what their own designated marksman could not. Finally, Hennigan's voice came through, tight with reluctant acceptance. Fine. O'Yelleran, you are volunteering. On his mark, Vance scanned the ridge one more time, marking every possible position where the ghost might be hiding. There were only 3 spots that offered both concealment and a good angle on the team's position. 3 spots to watch. 3 chances to catch a killer. Ready, Dagger 7. O'Yelleran's response was immediate. Ready. Vance took a breath. Mark. Through his scope, he saw O'Yelleran break from cover, sprinting east for exactly 3 seconds before diving behind a low wall. It was a perfect execution, just enough movement to draw the eye, just enough exposure to seem like a mistake. And on the ridge, in a position Vance had almost overlooked, something moved. There you are. The ghost had repositioned to the northern edge of the rock formation, tucked into a crevice that offered a perfect shot at the ground below. He was good. One of the best Vance had ever seen. In another life, under different circumstances, he might have respected the man's skill. But respect did not stop bullets. Vance adjusted for distance. 891 meters. The wind had picked up slightly, pushing left. He compensated, settling the crosshairs just ahead of where the ghost was aiming. His finger tightened on the trigger, and then the ghost turned, looked directly at him, raised his own rifle. 2 snipers, separated by nearly a kilometer of mountain air, each with the other in their sights. Vance fired first. The shots crossed in the mountain air, 2 bullets passing within feet of each other, each carrying the intent to kill. Vance felt the impact before he understood it. A sledgehammer blow to his left shoulder that spun him sideways and sent the M110 clattering against the rubble. Pain exploded through his body, white-hot and absolute, and for a moment the world dissolved into a roar of static and agony. He had missed. The ghost had not. Vance pressed himself against the debris, biting down on a scream that wanted to tear free from his throat. His left arm was useless, hanging limp at his side, blood already soaking through his uniform sleeve. The round had taken him high in the shoulder, missing the subclavian artery by inches. He was alive. Barely. Through the haze of pain, he heard the ghost's voice on the radio, calm and satisfied. First blood, American, but you're still breathing. That means I was careless. I will not be careless again. Vance did not respond. He was too busy trying not to pass out. His right hand fumbled for his medical kit, fingers clumsy with shock, while his mind raced through the tactical implications of his wound. One arm. one rifle, 13 rounds remaining, and an enemy sniper who now knew exactly where he was. Overwatch, report. O'Yellerin's voice was tight with fear. We heard the shots. Are you hit? Vance managed to key his radio with his good hand. Affirmative, Dagger 7. Shoulder wound. Still operational. It was a lie. He was far from operational. But dying men did not need to know that their only hope was bleeding out on a rooftop. He pulled a compression bandage from his kit and pressed it against the wound with his right hand, using his teeth to tear the wrapper. The pressure sent fresh waves of pain crashing through him, but the bleeding slowed. He would not bleed out. Not yet. The rifle lay 3 feet away, resting against a chunk of concrete. Vance stared at it, calculating the movement required to retrieve it. 3 feet might as well have been 3 miles. Any motion would expose him to the ghost's scope. He thought about Danny again, about the promise he had made over a young man's body in Fallujah. No more. No more dead friends, because he was not good enough. Vance moved. He threw himself toward the rifle, ignoring the scream of his shoulder, ignoring the spots dancing at the edges of his vision. His right hand closed around the stock, and he rolled, bringing the weapon up just as a round cracked through the space he had occupied half a second earlier. Close. Too close. But he had the rifle now, and he had seen the muzzle flash. The ghost had repositioned again, moving to a higher position that offered a better angle on Vance's cover. It was a smart play, a patient play, the kind of move that a man made when he knew he had already won and was simply taking his time. Warhammer Base, this is Talon 2-6. Vance transmitted on the command frequency, his voice strained but clear. Overwatch is wounded. Request updated ETA on air support. Captain Holmquist's response came immediately. Talon 2-6, storm is clearing faster than projected. We have a flight of Apaches inbound. ETA 22 minutes. Can you hold? 22 minutes. An eternity in a firefight. We will hold, Vance said. Talon 2-6 out. He switched back to the team frequency just in time to hear Hennigan's voice, stripped of its usual arrogance. Overwatch, what is your actual status? And do not lie to me this time. Vance considered the question. The Master Sergeant had been nothing but dismissive since the mission began, had treated him like equipment rather than a person, had ignored his warnings and gotten his team trapped in a kill zone. But Hennigan was also trying to keep his men alive. And right now, that meant he needed the truth. Left arm is out of commission, Vance said. I can still shoot, but I'm not moving fast. The ghost has me pinned. If I expose myself, he will finish the job. Silence on the radio. Then, very quietly, Hennigan spoke again. What do you need? Vance almost laughed. An hour ago, Hennigan would not have asked a combat controller for tactical advice. Funny how imminent death changed a man's perspective. I need to know where he is, Vance said. He is too good. I cannot track him and engage him at the same time. Not wounded. I need eyes. O'Yellerin's voice cut in. I can get to a position with sight lines on the ridge. If you tell me what to look for, I can spot for you. The words hit Vance like a second bullet. Spotter. The role Danny Reeves had played. The role that had gotten a 22-year-old kid killed. Negative, Dagger 7. That position will be exposed to enemy fire. I will not risk you. With respect, Overwatch, O'Yellerin replied. You do not get to make that call. We are all at risk. And right now, you're the only thing keeping us alive. Let me help you. Vance closed his eyes. He could feel the blood seeping through his bandage, feel his strength slowly draining away. 22 minutes until the Apaches arrived. 22 minutes to keep a legendary sniper at bay while wounded and outmaneuvered. He could not do it alone. Fine, he said finally. Move to the 2-story structure 40 meters north of your current position. Upper floor, northeast corner. You will have partial concealment behind the wall. Look for muzzle flash or movement in the rocks above the main ridge. Call out position using clock directions. Me as center. Copy, Overwatch. O'Yellerin's voice was steady. Moving now. Vance watched through his scope as O'Yellerin broke from cover and sprinted toward the new position. Bullets kicked up dust around her feet, but the remaining enemy fighters on the ridge were too scattered to focus effective fire. She made it. dove through a doorway and disappeared. 10 seconds later, her voice came through his earpiece. In position. I have eyes on the high ground. In Overwatch, I see movement. 2 o'clock, approximately 900 meters. He is repositioning again. Vance swung his rifle toward 2 o'clock, searching for the shape O'Yelleran had spotted. His shoulder screamed with every motion, but he forced the pain down, forced his focus to narrow to the single point of his scope. There, a shadow sliding between rocks, barely visible against the morning sun. I have him, Vance breathed. The ghost stopped moving, settled into a new position, raised his rifle, and this time, Vance did not miss. The round struck rock 6 inches from the ghost's head, sending fragments spraying across his position. Through his scope, Vance saw the enemy sniper flinch and roll away, disappearing behind cover before a follow-up shot could find him. Missed. Again. Vance cursed under his breath. The wound was affecting him more than he wanted to admit. His shooting hand was steady, but his support arm was useless, forcing him to improvise a rest from rubble that shifted with every breath. Precision shooting required stability. He had neither. Overwatch, you hit something. O'Yelleran's voice carried a note of confusion. He is moving differently now. I think you may have winged him. Vance processed this information. A wounded enemy was still dangerous, but it meant the ghost was no longer operating at full capacity. Small comfort when Vance himself was losing blood with every passing minute. Keep tracking him, Dagger 7. He will try to reposition for a clean shot. Call out any movement. Copy. O'Yelleran paused. An Overwatch. That was a hell of a shot. 890 meters with one arm. Who taught you to shoot like that? The question hung in the air. Vance could have deflected it, could have made a joke or changed the subject. But something about O'Yelleran's voice, the genuine curiosity mixed with respect, made him want to answer honestly. Marine Corps Scout Sniper School, he said quietly. Class 0407. I was an instructor there for 2 years before I transferred to the Air Force. The radio was silent for a long moment. Then O'Yelleran spoke again, her voice different now, carrying something that sounded almost like awe. You were a Marine sniper, and you became a combat controller. It is a long story. We have 20 minutes until those Apaches show up. O'Yelleran's tone shifted to something warmer. I would not mind hearing it. Vance scanned the ridge while he considered the request. The remaining enemy fighters had gone to ground after his initial barrage, but he could see movement in the rocks. They were regrouping, preparing for something. I had a spotter, he said finally. Danny Reeves. Kid from Georgia. Best natural observer I ever worked with. Could read wind like other people read street signs. He paused, the memory pressing against his chest like a physical weight. We were in Fallujah, hunting an insurgent sniper who had killed 6 Marines in 2 weeks. We got close. Too close. He made us before we made him. O'Yelleran did not interrupt. She simply listened, her silence an invitation to continue. Danny took a round to the throat. Vance's voice was flat, controlled, but something cracked beneath the surface. I held him while he died. Took almost 4 minutes. He could not speak, but he kept looking at me, like he was waiting for me to do something. Fix it somehow. I am sorry. O'Yelleran's words were simple, genuine. After that, I could not do it anymore. Vance continued. Could not be the shooter. Every time I looked through a scope, I saw his face. So I transferred to the Air Force. Became a combat controller. Told myself the rifle was just for self-defense. But you kept carrying it. Vance almost smiled. Yeah, I kept carrying it. Guess some part of me knew this day would come. Movement. O'Yelleran's voice snapped back to professional urgency. 11 o'clock, approximately 800 meters. Multiple fighters advancing down the slope. I count 6, maybe 7. Vance swung his scope toward the threat. She was right. The remaining enemy fighters were abandoning their positions on the ridge and moving downhill, using the terrain for cover. They were trying to close the distance, get inside his effective range, where superior numbers would matter more than marksmanship. Dagger 1, this is Overwatch. Vance transmitted on the team frequency. Enemy is advancing on your position. 6 to 7 fighters moving down the eastern slope. Estimate 3 minutes until they reach effective assault range. Hennigan's response was grim. Understood. We are low on ammunition and Ibarra is fading. If they reach us before those helicopters arrive, we are done. Vance looked at his rifle. 12 rounds remaining. 6 or 7 enemy fighters advancing, plus the ghost still lurking somewhere on the high ground. The mathematics were not in his favor. Then we do not let them reach you, he said. He found his first target, a fighter moving between rocks, confident in his cover. 760 meters. Vance tracked him, waited for the pause between steps, and fired. The man dropped. 11 rounds. Another fighter broke from cover, sprinting downhill. Vance led him by 2 body lengths, compensating for movement. Fired. Mississippi. The round kicked up dust behind the running man. 10 rounds. He is still moving, O'Yelleran reported. Angle right. He is heading for that cluster of boulders at your 1 o'clock. Vance adjusted, found the target again. The fighter had slowed, thinking he was safe behind the rocks. Vance waited. Patience. The man's head appeared above the boulder line, scanning for threats. Vance fired. The head disappeared. 9 rounds. Overwatch. O'Yelleran's voice carried a warning. I lost the ghost. He was at your 2 o'clock, but he is gone. I do not have eyes on him. Vance felt ice slide down his spine. The ghost was wounded, but not dead. And a wounded predator was the most dangerous kind. Keep scanning, he said, and stay low. If you cannot see him, he might be repositioning on you. Copy. Be careful, Overwatch. Vance wanted to laugh at that. Careful had stopped being an option the moment the first shot was fired. Now there was only survival. His or theirs. He found another advancing fighter and took the shot. Hit. 8 rounds. The enemy advance was faltering. The fighters had expected to close the distance under covering fire from the ghost, but with their sniper wounded and unable to suppress, they were exposed. Vulnerable. Dying. But they kept coming. And somewhere on that ridge, a killer was circling for the final strike. Vance felt his vision blur for a moment. Blood loss. Salt. His body was failing him one system at a time. Hold together, he told himself. Just a little longer. In his earpiece, O'Yelleran's voice went sharp with fear. Overwatch. Muzzle flash. 3 o'clock high. He is aiming at your position. Move now. Vance threw himself sideways as the round punched through the space where his chest had been. The impact of his wounded shoulder against concrete sent white fire through his nervous system, and for a moment the world went gray at the edges. He tasted copper, blood in his mouth from biting his tongue. The ghost was done playing. Vance forced himself to move, dragging his body behind a jagged section of collapsed wall. His rifle scraped against rubble, the sound impossibly loud in the sudden silence between shots. Every breath was a knife in his ribs. Every heartbeat pumped more blood through the bandage that was already soaked through. Overwatch status. O'Yelleran's voice was tight with controlled panic. Talk to me. Still here. Vance's voice came out as a rasp. He is getting impatient. That is good. Impatient men make mistakes. He is also getting closer. O'Yelleran reported. I tracked the muzzle flash. He has moved down from the high ground. Maybe 600 meters now. He is trying to close the distance. Vance understood the tactic. At longer ranges, the wounded American had proven dangerous. The ghost was adapting, reducing the variables that worked against him. Shorter distance meant less bullet drop, less wind drift, less chance for error. It also meant less time to react. Warhammer, this is Talon 2-6. Vance keyed the command frequency. Updated ETA on-air support. Captain Holmquist's response was immediate. 14 minutes, Talon 2-6. Flight of 2 Apaches. They are pushing hard. Can you hold? 14 minutes. Vance looked at his shaking hand, at the blood dripping from his fingertips, at the rifle that felt heavier with each passing moment. We will hold, he said, because that was what you said, even when it was a lie. He switched back to the team frequency. Dagger 1. What is your ammunition status? Hennigan's voice was grim. Down to maybe 2 magazines per man. We have been conserving, but if they rush us, we will not last long. They will not rush you. Vance said it with more confidence than he felt. I'm going to end this. He pushed himself up to a firing position, ignoring the scream of his shoulder, ignoring the darkness creeping at the edges of his vision. The scope found a ridge, sweeping across the rocks where the ghost had last been seen. Nothing. The enemy sniper had gone aground. Dagger 7, Vance transmitted. I need you to give me a reference point. Where exactly did you see that muzzle flash? O'Yellerin's response was precise. From your position, 3 o'clock. There is a rock formation shaped like a broken tooth. He was just below the left edge, maybe 20 meters downslope from the formation. Vance found a broken tooth formation. Study the terrain below it. The ghost would have moved after firing, standard sniper protocol. But moved where? There were only so many positions that offered both concealment and a firing angle. He is smart, Vance thought, but smart is predictable. If the ghost wanted to close distance while maintaining cover, he would move along the natural terrain lines, following the path of least exposure. Vance traced the route in his mind, calculating where the enemy would be now, where he would be in 30 seconds, where he would be when he finally had the shot he wanted. There, a shallow depression between two boulder clusters, approximately 550 meters out. It was the only position that made tactical sense. The ghost would reach it in seconds if he was not there already. Vance settled his crosshairs on the depression and waited. Overwatch, O'Yellerin's voice carried a warning. The fighters on the slope are moving again. I count 4 still active. They are 200 meters from our position. Hennigan cut in. We see them. Engaging now. The sound of gunfire erupted from below, American rifles answering the crack of enemy weapons. Vance forced himself to ignore it. His focus had to stay on the depression, on the killing ground where this would end. Come on, he whispered. Show yourself. His heart was pounding too fast. The blood loss was catching up with him, his body's reserves finally running dry. He had maybe 5 minutes of useful consciousness left. Maybe less. The ghost appeared. He rose from behind a boulder exactly where Vance had predicted, rifle already coming up, already seeking his target. For one frozen moment, the two snipers were mirrors of each other. Wounded, determined, ready to die if it meant taking the other with them. Vance saw the ghost scope flash in the sunlight, saw the barrel steady on his position, knew that in half a second, one of them would fire and one of them would die. Time stretched like taffy. Vance's finger tightened on the trigger. The world narrowed to a single point of focus. The crosshairs, the target, the space between heartbeats, where everything hung in perfect stillness. He thought of Danny Reeves, bleeding out on a rooftop in Fallujah. He thought of the 12 men below who would die if he failed. He thought of O'Yellerin, trusting him with her life. One shot, one calm shot, that was all it would take. Vance exhaled and fired. The M110 bucked against his shoulder. The round crossed 547 meters in less than a second. And in the scope, Vance watched the ghost jerk backward, rifle falling from his hands, body crumpling into the rocks. The mountain went quiet. For a long moment, Vance could not move, could not breathe, could only stare at the motionless form of the man who had killed so many. Then O'Yellerin's voice filled his earpiece, shaking with relief. Overwatch. Target down. Repeat, the ghost is down. Vance slumped against the wall, his rifle sliding from his grip. 7 rounds remaining. But he would not need them. It was over. Almost over. He corrected himself. Below, the gunfire continued. For enemy fighters still advancing. 12 Americans still fighting. Dagger elements, Vance transmitted, his voice barely above a whisper. High-value target eliminated. Apaches inbound in 12 minutes. Hold the line. He closed his eyes, just for a moment. Just a rest. The darkness was warm and inviting, promising relief from the pain that consumed him. Overwatch. O'Yellerin's voice was sharp with fear. Overwatch, respond. Elias, stay with me. Elias. The name cut through the fog like a blade. Elias, do not you dare die on me. Not after everything. Vance forced his eyes open. The world swam in shades of gray and red, but O'Yellerin's voice anchored him, pulled him back from the edge of the darkness that wanted to swallow him whole. Still here, he managed. Just resting my eyes. That is not funny. O'Yellerin's voice cracked. We have 4 hostiles still approaching. Hennigan's team, is almost out of ammunition. We need you. Vance looked at his hands. They were pale, trembling, slick with blood that had long since stopped being alarming and started being inevitable. His body was failing, but his mind was still sharp. And somewhere in the ruins of this forgotten Afghan village, 12 Americans were counting on him. He reached for the rifle. The M110 felt like it weighed 100 pounds. Every movement sent fresh waves of agony through his shoulder, but Vance dragged the weapon into position anyway. 7 rounds. 4 targets. The math was finally in his favor. Dagger 7, he transmitted. Talk to me. Where are they? O'Yellern's response was immediate, her voice steadying as she fell back into the rhythm of spotting. 2 hostiles approaching from the northeast, using the drainage ditch for cover. They are maybe 150 meters from the team's position. 2 more coming from the east, closer to 200 meters. Moving in pairs. Vance found the drainage ditch in his scope. At this angle, he could see the crown of a head moving along the depression. 147 meters. Close enough that even with his wounds, the shot was almost trivial. He fired. The head disappeared in a spray that Vance did not let himself think about. 6 rounds. The second fighter in the ditch rose up in panic, looking for the threat that had killed his companion. He was exposed for exactly 2 seconds. Vance made them count. 5 rounds. Dagger 1, this is Overwatch. Vance's voice was stronger now, steadied by purpose. 2 hostiles down in the northeast drainage. 2 remaining, approaching from the east. Hennigan's response carried something Vance had never heard from the Master Sergeant before. Gratitude. Copy, Overwatch. We have eyes on the eastern approach. They're behind the stone wall, 50 meters out. Too close, Vance thought. At that range, the enemy could rush the team's position in seconds. Hennigan's men were low on ammunition, exhausted, with a critically wounded man to protect. If those last 2 fighters made their move, people would die. I do not have an angle. Vance transmitted. The wall is blocking my shot. You need to draw them out. Negative, Hennigan replied. If we expose ourselves, they will cut us down. Vance closed his eyes, thinking. The wall was solid, maybe 4 feet high, running perpendicular to his position. The fighters behind it were invisible to him, but they could not stay there forever. The Apaches were coming. Tom was on the American side now, unless the enemy knew that too. Dagger 1, Vance said slowly. They're not going to wait. They know air support is coming. They're going to rush you in the next 60 seconds. Try to finish this before the helicopters arrive. Then what do you suggest, Overwatch? Hennigan's voice was tight with frustration. Vance looked at his rifle, at his bloody hands, at the collapsed building around him that had been his fortress and might become his grave. I'm coming down, he said. The radio exploded with protests. O'Yellern's voice was loudest. Overwatch, negative. You can barely stand. You will never make it. I did not have to make it all the way. Vance was already moving, pushing himself up from the rubble with his one good arm. I just have to get to a position with a clear angle on that wall. 50 meters south of here, there is a collapsed archway. I can see it from my position. If I can reach it, I will have a shot. That is open ground, O'Yellern said. If there are any other hostiles we missed, you will be completely exposed. Then I guess we better hope we did not miss any. Vance did not wait for further argument. He grabbed his rifle, slung it across his back with his good arm, and started moving. Every step was agony. Every breath was a battle. But he kept going because stopping meant dying, and dying meant failing the men who had trusted him. The journey from his Overwatch position to the collapsed archway was maybe 60 meters. It felt like 60 miles. Vance moved in a stumbling crouch, using rubble for cover, expecting a bullet to find him with every passing second. None came. He reached the archway and collapsed behind it, his chest heaving, his vision swimming. Blood was dripping freely from his shoulder now, leaving a trail behind him like a wounded animal. But when he brought the rifle up and looked through the scope, he had the angle he needed. The 2 fighters were crouched behind the stone wall, preparing to move. He could see them clearly now, weapons ready, bodies tense for the final assault. Vance centered his crosshairs on the first man's chest. Dagger 1, he transmitted. On my shot. They're going to break cover. Be ready. Copy, Overwatch. Hennigan's voice was quiet. And Vance. Thank you. Vance almost smiled. First time a master sergeant had used his name. He fired. The first fighter dropped. The second broke cover exactly as predicted, sprinting toward the American position with his weapon blazing. He made it maybe 5 steps before 3 rifles from Hennigan's team cut him down. Silence fell over the valley. Vance let the rifle slide from his grip and slumped against the archway. 4 rounds remaining. 0 targets. Above, cutting through the morning air like the voice of salvation itself, came the distant thunder of helicopter rotors. Warhammer, this is Dagger 1. Hennigan's voice was hoarse with relief. All hostiles neutralized. We have 1 urgent surgical and 1 priority wounded. Request immediate medevac. Dagger 1, this is Warhammer. Captain Holmquist responded, her voice warm with something that sounded like pride. Apaches are on station. Medevac is 2 minutes behind them. Outstanding work down there. Vance heard the words through a haze of exhaustion and pain. Outstanding work. He supposed it was. 15 enemy fighters dead, including one of the most wanted snipers in Afghanistan. 12 Americans alive. Not bad for just Overwatch. The first thing Vance became aware of was the sound of rotors. Then the dust, swirling around him in a hurricane of grit and noise. Then the hands grabbing him, lifting him, carrying him toward the helicopter that had materialized out of the morning sky like a mechanical angel. He tried to speak, but nothing came out. His body had finally surrendered to what his mind had been fighting for the past hour. Blood loss. Shock. The accumulated trauma of wounds that should have killed him. Easy, brother. Easy. A voice he did not recognize, calm and professional. We have got you. You're going home. Vance wanted to ask about the others. About Ibarra. About O'Yellerin. But the darkness was pulling at him again, and this time he did not have the strength to resist. He let go. When he opened his eyes again, the world was white. White ceiling. White walls. White sheets beneath hands that were clean for the first time in what felt like years. The steady beep of a heart monitor told him he was alive. The absence of pain told him he was heavily medicated. There you are. Vance turned his head, a movement that took far more effort than it should have. O'Yellerin sat in a chair beside his bed, still wearing her dusty uniform, dark circles under her eyes, the most beautiful sight he had ever seen. How long, he managed. His voice was a croak, barely human. 18 hours. O'Yellerin leaned forward. You've been in and out. Surgery went well. Doctors say you're going to keep the arm, but it was close. Another 20 minutes, and you would have bled out. Vance processed this information slowly. 20 minutes. He had been that close to dying. Ibarra, he asked. Stable. O'Yellerin's face softened. Lost a lot of blood like you. But he's going to make it. Everyone is going to make it. Because of you. Vance closed his eyes. The weight of those words settled over him like a blanket. Everyone is going to make it. 12 men who had walked into an ambush. 12 men who should have died. 12 men who were alive because a combat controller on a rooftop had remembered how to be something else. The door opened, and Vance heard footsteps approaching. Multiple sets. Heavy boots on tile floor. He opened his eyes to find Master Sergeant Hennigan standing at the foot of his bed, flanked by 2 other members of the team. The Master Sergeant's face was unreadable, his posture stiff with military formality. Technical Sergeant Vance, Hennigan said. His voice carried none of the contempt it had held before. I owe you an apology. Vance said nothing. He was too tired and too medicated to navigate whatever this was. I dismissed you, Hennigan continued. Treated you like you were not worth my time. Called you weatherman. And when you tried to warn me about the ambush, I ignored you. That arrogance nearly got my entire team killed. He paused, and something flickered across his face. Something that looked almost like shame. I've been doing this for 16 years, Hennigan said quietly. I thought I knew everything. Thought I could read any situation. But I did not see what you saw. And when everything went wrong, you're the one who saved us. Not me. Vance looked at the Master Sergeant for a long moment. The anger he might have felt was gone, burned away by exhaustion and blood loss and the simple fact that they were all still breathing. We all made it, Vance said finally. That is what matters. Hennigan nodded slowly. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out something small and metallic. He set on the table beside Vance's bed. It was a green beret. I know you were a Marine, Hennigan said, and I know you're Air Force now. But as far as I am concerned, you earned this today. You are one of us. Vance stared at the beret. He did not have words for what he was feeling. Did not know if words existed for this particular combination of exhaustion and gratitude and grief and pride. Thank you, he said. It was inadequate, but it was all he had. Hennigan nodded once, then turned and walked out. The other team members followed, each offering a nod of respect as they passed. When they were gone, O'Yelleran reached over and took Vance's hand. Her grip was warm and strong and impossibly gentle. There is something else, she said. I was not sure if I should tell you yet, but you deserve to know. Vance looked at her, waiting. After the medevac, Captain Holmquist started pulling your service record. She wanted to know who you really were. O'Yelleran paused. She found some things that were not supposed to be found. Vance felt something cold settle in his chest. His classified history. The missions that officially never happened. The medals that lived in files no one was supposed to access. What kind of things? He asked carefully. O'Yelleran met his eyes. You have 2 silver stars. A bronze star with valor. And something called the Intelligence Star, which apparently means the CIA thinks you did something extraordinary. All of it classified. All of it buried. Vance said nothing. Those medals belonged to a different man. A man who had died on a rooftop in Fallujah, holding his spotter's hand. The ghost, O'Yelleran continued. His real name was Mahmoud al-Rashidi. He was responsible for the deaths of 14 American service members over the past 3 years. 3 sniper teams, 2 forward observers, a helicopter crew. Vance, you killed one of the most wanted men in Afghanistan, and you did it with one arm while bleeding out at nearly 900 meters. She squeezed his hand. You're not just Overwatch, Elias. You never were. Vance looked at the ceiling. Somewhere in the distance, he could hear helicopters landing. More wounded coming in. More lives hanging in the balance. I was today, he said quietly, and that was enough. 3 days passed in a haze of medication and dreamless sleep. Vance drifted in and out of consciousness, his body slowly remembering how to function without the constant flood of adrenaline that had kept him alive on that rooftop. Nurses came and went. Doctors examined his shoulder and made approving sounds. The world continued turning, indifferent to the fact that he had nearly left it. On the 4th day, he woke to find a woman in Air Force blues standing at the foot of his bed. Captain Holmquist was younger than he had expected, maybe 35, with sharp eyes and the kind of bearing that suggested she had earned her rank the hard way. Technical Sergeant Vance, she said. It is good to finally meet you in person. Vance pushed himself up against his pillows, wincing as his shoulder protested. Captain, I owe you thanks. You kept pushing for that air support. I was doing my job. Holmquist moved to the chair O'Yelleran had occupied and sat down. You were doing considerably more than yours. She studied him for a moment, her expression unreadable. I have been in the military for 12 years, she said. I have seen a lot of heroism, a lot of sacrifice. But what you did out there was something else entirely. Wounded, alone, outgunned. You took on a legendary sniper and won. You saved 12 lives with 7 rounds and 1 functioning arm. Vance looked at his hands. The bandages on his left arm were clean now, white against skin that was still too pale. I did what needed to be done, he said. Holmquist shook her head. No, you did what no one else could have done. And I think you need to hear that, because I get the sense you have been carrying something heavy for a long time. Vance met her eyes. For a moment, neither of them spoke. His name was Danny Reeves, Vance said finally. My spotter. He was 22 years old. His wife was pregnant with their first kid. I was supposed to protect him, and I failed. Holmquist listened without interrupting. After he died, I cannot be that person anymore. The sniper. The killer. So I transferred. Became a combat controller. Told myself I was still serving, just in a different way. Vance paused. But I never stopped carrying the rifle. Never stopped training. I think part of me knew that someday I would have to be that person again. And when that day came, Holmquist said quietly, you were ready. Vance thought about the rooftop. about the weight of the M110 in his hands, about the moment when everything had narrowed to a single point of focus and he had become, for one terrible hour, exactly what he used to be. I do not know if ready is the right word, he said, but I did not run from it. Not this time. Holmquist reached into her briefcase and pulled out a folder. She sat on the bed beside him. This is going to complicate your life, she said. After-action reports. Intelligence assessments. A lot of people are going to want to talk to you about what happened, about who you really are. Vance looked at the folder without touching it. And there is something else, Holmquist continued. General Mercer, JSOC commander, has requested a personal briefing. He wants to meet the man who killed a ghost. Vance closed his eyes. He had spent 3 years trying to disappear, trying to be invisible. Just Overwatch. Just the guy with the radio. That was over now. What happens next, he asked. That depends on you. Holmquist leaned back in her chair. You could go back to being a combat controller. Pretend none of this happened. Some people will know the truth, but officially, you will just be another CCT who got lucky in a firefight. She paused. Where you can stop hiding. Vance opened his eyes. What does that mean? It means there are people who could use someone with your skills. Your experience. Holmquist's voice was careful, measured. Special operations units that would kill to have a shooter like you. Training programs that need instructors who have actually done the impossible. Vance thought about Danny again. About the promise he had made over a young man's body in Fallujah. No more. No more dead friends. But there had been more. There would always be more. Young men and women putting their lives on the line, trusting that someone had their back. Trusting that when everything went wrong, there would be someone on a rooftop, watching over them. He looked at Holmquist. I need to think about it, he said. She nodded. Take your time. You have earned that much. She stood and moved toward the door, then paused. For what it is worth, she said, Staff Sergeant O'Yelleran has been asking about you every few hours. She is currently threatening to court-martial anyone who does not let her visit. I thought you should know. Despite everything, Vance smiled. That sounds like her. Holmquist returned the smile. Get some rest, Technical Sergeant. You have a lot of people who want to thank you. She left, and Vance was alone with the folder and his thoughts. Through the window, he could see the Afghan mountains in the distance, brown and ancient and indifferent to the small dramas of men with rifles. Somewhere out there, on a ridgeline now crawling with American forces, the ghost body was being recovered. Intelligence officers would study his weapons, his equipment, his network. They would learn everything they could about the man who had terrorized these valleys for years. And they would know that his reign had ended because a combat controller on a rooftop had refused to be just Overwatch. The door opened again. O'Yelleran slipped inside, still in uniform, her eyes red from lack of sleep. I heard Holmquist was here, she said. What did she want? Vance looked at her for a long moment. Then he reached out with his good hand. Sit with me, he said. I will tell you everything. 2 weeks later, Vance stood on the tarmac at Bagram Airfield, watching a C-17 taxi toward the terminal. His left arm was in a sling, the shoulders still weeks away from full mobility, but the doctors had cleared him to travel. He was going home, wherever that was now. The Afghan sun beat down on his neck, familiar and unforgiving. He had spent years in places like this, under skies that did not care whether men lived or died. He had always thought he would die under one of them. Instead, he was leaving with a folder full of commendations and a future he had not expected to have. Footsteps approached from behind. He did not need to turn to know who it was. You were going to leave without saying goodbye, O'Yelleran said. Her voice carried a note of accusation that did not quite hide the hurt beneath. Vance turned. She was in clean ACUs now, her gear squared away, looking every inch the professional soldier. But her eyes told a different story. I was not sure what to say, he admitted. How about thank you for saving my life? Or I will keep in touch. Or maybe, I do not know. Here's my email address, so we can stay connected after you disappear back into whatever classified world you came from. Vance almost smiled. She had a point. I'm not good at this, he said. The goodbye part. I have spent most of my career trying not to get attached to people. It is easier that way. When things go wrong, it hurts less. O'Yelleran stepped closer. And how is that working out for you? Vance thought about Danny Reeves, about the years of isolation and guilt, about the walls he had built around himself, so high and so thick that he had almost forgotten there was anything worth protecting behind them. Not great, he admitted. O'Yelleran reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She pressed it into his good hand. My email, she said. My phone number. My mother's address in Ohio, in case you lose everything else and need to find me the old-fashioned way. Vance looked at the paper. Her handwriting was neat, precise, exactly what he would have expected from a woman who could spot a sniper at 900 meters. I watched you almost die, O'Yelleran continued. I sat by your bed for 3 days, waiting to see if you would wake up. I'm not letting you disappear without a fight. So whatever you decide to do next, whoever you decide to be, you better keep me in the loop. Vance folded the paper carefully and tucked it into his breast pocket. I will, he said, and he meant it. The C-17's engines whined as it reached the terminal, the rear ramp beginning to lower. Other soldiers were gathering, preparing to board, heading home to families and futures and lives that had been waiting for them. Vance had none of those things. His apartment in Florida was empty. His family was distant, connected only by occasional phone calls and obligatory holiday cards. The only home he had ever really known was the military, and even that had become complicated. But standing here, looking at O'Yelleran, he felt something he had not felt in years. Possibility. What are you going to do? O'Yelleran asked. Holmquist told me about the offer. Training programs. Special operations. A chance to stop pretending you are something you are not. Vance looked toward the mountains one last time. Somewhere out there, men were still fighting, still dying, still counting on people like him to keep them alive. I do not know yet, he said honestly. For 3 years, I have been running from who I used to be, telling myself that if I just kept my head down, did my job, stayed invisible, the past would not matter anymore. He paused. But it does matter. What I could do matters. And maybe it's time I stopped being ashamed of it. O'Yelleran nodded slowly. Danny would be proud of you. The words hit him like a physical blow. For a moment, he could not breathe, could not speak. Danny Reeves, the kid from Georgia who had died believing in him, would have been proud. Thank you, Vance said. His voice was rough. For everything. For spotting. For staying. For not letting me give up. O'Yelleran smiled, and there was warmth in it. Real warmth. The kind that promised something beyond this moment, beyond this dusty airfield, beyond the war that had brought them together. Just doing my job, she said. Overwatch. Vance laughed. It was the first real laugh he could remember in years. The loadmaster waved from the C-17's ramp. Time to board. Time to leave. Time to figure out what came next. Vance picked up his bag with his good arm and started walking. Halfway to the ramp, he stopped and turned. Ohio, he called back. Your mother's address. O'Yelleran raised an eyebrow. I'm going to need somewhere to recover before I make any decisions, Vance said. And I hear Ohio is nice this time of year. Her smile widened into something that looked like joy. I will tell her to expect company. Vance nodded once, then turned and walked up the ramp. The aircraft was full of soldiers heading home, men and women who had done their duty and earned their rest. He found an empty seat near the back and settled in, careful with his wounded shoulder. As the ramp closed and the engines roared to life, he pulled the folded paper from his pocket. O'Yelleran's handwriting, her phone number, her mother's address, a future he had not expected, a connection he had not sought, a reason to be more than just Overwatch. The C-17 lifted off, leaving Afghanistan behind. Vance watched through the window as the mountains shrank into the distance, brown and ancient and indifferent. He had come here as a ghost, hiding from his past. He was leaving as something else, something he did not have a name for yet. But for the first time in 3 years, he was looking forward to finding out. If this story moved you, share your thoughts about what moment hit you hardest, or tell us about a time when someone stepped up when no one expected them to.